Hi, Gil.
See, I've heard all this before.
Yeah.
So here's your chance to tell someone who doesn't know you.
Oh, you really want to hear this?
Yes. So tell Gil about the kind of music you perform.
It is very, you know, I'm a freestyle jazz blues artist. I play piano and I sing. But I sing, every tune I sing, I'm relating to that tune, some way or another. I think they wrote every song that I sing for me. I can relate. But each time I sing it, they tell me that it's different. I guess it's moods and everything, but that's what I do. I perform blues. It's a melodic jazz. It's not a very progressive jazz, you know. You can always stay within that melody that I improvise off. That's pretty much what I do. I once said in a radio interview, I do a little of that and a little of this, but not much of anything. And my husband says I should never say anything like that again. But I just said it, didn't I? I just said it. See?
All right. Let me give you one thing, Type 4. See your glasses? I want you to just take them and just tilt them up just a hair like that. Just a hair. That way so they're angled this way, but just a tiny bit. So that way, no. Just see what I'm doing? Just like this, and just angle the earpiece just a hair up.
Okay.
I'll do it for you. Because next question. Actually, maybe just tell again. Maybe just introduce yourself to Gil. Hello, I'm Del Rae and all this. You don't say
Hi, Gil.
You don't say hello, but for everybody out there,
I know.
My name is Del Rae.
You know who I am, right? I'm Del Rae. I'm a freestyle, jazz, blues, pianist and vocalist. My music, I perform not a progressive jazz. It's more melodic jazz, where you can always stay within the melody. You know where it is going. You know where it is. Because I can improvise, you know, and sometimes I get crazy with improvising. I might slip and hit the wrong note or something like that. The late Count Basie, when I was working at the Hilton, it was the Kennedy Hilton and Kennedy Airport, they had to go through that little hotel when they were taking a plane out somewhere. And they used to say, they would stop by because I played in the lounge there in the lobby. And they would say, we can see what you're trying to do. And they sort of gave me a lot of points, you know, to help me with my performances. Because I never really had planned to play piano. I always wanted to be a stand-up singer. I love standing up. But out of necessity, I had to do that. Because remember when, no, you wouldn't know either, when the Beatles came along, they came along in the 60s, I believe it was. And at that time, they came with their guitars and everything. We had the big band going then. I was working with the big band guys. And I was a stand-up singer, blues and jazz singer. But the Beatles came in, they brought their own instruments in where they can carry them in their hands and go anywhere. So the big bands, well, they also brought about a new sound, and the big bands were sort of thrown a little in the background, as they say, put on the back burner. Not really, because they didn't stop, but there was that, you know, diminished need for that. Everybody was bringing the Beatles. Well, they did good music, I will say that. You know, I've always loved their music. And some of the bands, because they weren't getting the work that normally they got, I didn't have work, right? So when I went out there, and then I was working, I did other things, I taught school. You name it, I claim it. That I took jobs. I worked with the Department of Social Services in New York City. I worked as Girl Fridays as a scout, you know, for music. I interviewed talent and stuff like that for an agency. I just did any little odd jobs I could pick up. And finally I got very ill. And it was a very, I was very, very ill. And they had sort of given a diagnosis of my case and had said unless, you know, such a thing, that I wouldn't last over 3 weeks because I was in a critical illness. And I decided that I was going to leave the job I was on. The job I was on was very stressful. And because I left this job, then I told my husband, I says, listen, you know what? I'm going to do what I've always dabbled. I've always dabbled since I was, well, I've always sang since I was knee-high to a duck. But as of 15, I would say I started working professionally because I had to work my way through college. So I sang with a big band, right, to work my way through college. And to make a long story short, which is already too long, I have just lost my point that I'm trying to tell you. Where was I? See, you weren't even listening either, were you? I'm trying to tell you about the Beatles and how I couldn't work. So I decided that I would just go full-time in music. So I went out there thinking I'm going to get a job singing, maybe stand up behind a pianist, and I'll sing the blues in the lounge, because the lounges were very open then, a lot of them. And I couldn't get the, they said, can you play your own, if you can play guitar or piano? No, I don't play an instrument. But I had music. I majored in music in college. I got my degree in music. And I taught music for a while. But I just didn't like teaching. I'm not a teacher. I'm really a performer. So I decided to go for an interview. They said, we'll have to do 2 songs. They liked what I said, and they said, you'll come back next Thursday. And this was now in '71 already. So I went back, and I had the 2 songs planned. But I couldn't play, really, because I never wanted to play piano. I sat there and I chorded from a tune I had learned in the church. But, you know, and as this is not just a cliche or anything, this is for real. I started singing in the church. And I put those 2 songs, I was going to do Satin Doll, and I was going to do Stardust. And I was going to do them in the key of C. And I was going to do them to this one church song, chords only. I started it, I did the next. There were other people to audition too. Then somebody, and because I had been a stand-up singer with the big band, and I wasn't of this new generation from the Beatles that came along in the '60s, right? There were people there that knew the old songs, and they wanted to hear them. I knew them. So the same chords of these, I would just make a chord, and I would use my voice to carry it. That's why I do a lot of scatting and stuff now. Because you heard me, you know, how I do. And it was so funny. Then one of the customers came up with this big silver tray and sat it on top of my piano where I was doing 2 songs. But now you got to remember, I've done about 5 songs now on that same chording. But I just used my voice to sort of change the melody. And they started putting money in there. Now, there were other people to audition, but the customers wouldn't let me off the stage, so my boss came and said, well, the man who became my boss, he said, I don't know if you know what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing, but my customers seem to like it. You'll start next Thursday. And that's how I started playing piano, because I went back and I told my husband, it isn't fair. I use 1 chord all night, and my voice really, I sang a cappella, except for the chord every now and then, I said, so I'm going to learn to do a set, because they told me the hours that I would be working. And I knew from you know, my previous experience was with working in show business, that 40 minutes on was a set and 20 minutes off was rest. So I timed the 40 minutes within the 4 hours I was to work. But what I couldn't do, I couldn't capture but 25 songs for that whole night. So what I did was just, and because I couldn't really play, I could just chord, I had to do 25 songs in a set. But you know, today you only have to do 13 songs in 40 minutes. Because now I can play, I can do a little of this, a little of that, you know, improvise a bit on it, carry the melody in my own freestyle, and you can work it out 40 minutes, and it makes an interesting song. The other way, of course, you just sang the song and you were through with it. You didn't, I don't think you even knew what it meant. Words meant a lot to me, and they still do mean a lot to me. That's why I say I think I relate to every song. Does that explain what I talk a lot, don't I? I do.
That's all right. That's what we're after today.
Yeah.
Let's backtrack just a tiny bit and get some facts and figures here. And tell us when and where you were born and raised.
Okay. When I was, to make a long story short, which is already too long, when I was 35 or 40 or 50, I wouldn't tell my age. I would just say, I'm 29 and holding, maybe for the third time, you know, something like that. But now I'm very happy because I'm blessed to be here because I'm getting so many, I'm meeting angels. You know, I told you, remember I told you during the old days, everybody in show business wanted an angel, somebody who was out there to help them or something, or encourage them, or, you know. And now I'm very happy because I have come to that point in my life where I do meet beautiful people. I was born in Montgomery, Alabama, June 29, 1930. I'm 70, how am I? 71 years old. 71 years old. This is 2002. Yeah, I'll be 72 in June. God willing. A lot of my friends are gone. A lot of my friends. In fact, I tell the few that are left, I'm in a dying generation. I know that's life, to be born and to die, but in between, you can do things. And now, I'm really seeing that. And I'm gonna do things in between. And it's not too late. That's why I'm so proud of my age. Because a lot of people didn't get to do this, and a lot of people still don't get to do what they want to. I was so ill last year, I didn't realize, I went to apologize to one of the doctors when I was in the hospital, how rude I was to him. I ran him out of my room. And he told my husband, he says, your wife came to apologize to me, but she didn't owe me an apology. She was at death's door. I've been suffering with congestive heart failure attacks for 3 months and didn't know it. And I was on my way to New York to do a concert, and I collapsed at the airport in Columbia. And they wanted to, my husband wanted me to go back and go to the hospital, and I refused. And I got enough energy to let them put me in a wheelchair and wheel me to that plane. I went to New York and I did my concert. And I had an attack there, and a doctor told me to see my doctor as soon as I got back. And that's what I did, and I didn't realize I had a blood clot on the left ventricle that was wavering because that side was so weak. And they said that it could have either gone up where I could have been a vegetable, or it could have just been a massive stroke. And I never knew that. But I'm together today, you know, they got it together. Because a lot of it comes from there. And it takes 71 years of experience to realize that now every day counts. So I'm very proud of my age. There's a lady that calls me, I don't know how she got that, she thinks I'm 80 years old, but it's all right. I got 99 years of experience.
That's great. Tell us about where you went to school and what you used to, how you got in with the big band and all that.
Okay, I went to school in Montgomery, and in Montgomery, Alabama. Well, I told you, you name it, I claim it. I've always worked. I've worked since I was 9 years old. When I went to college, I worked my way through college. And I started with a band called Willie Green. And some of the guys came out of that band. Well, then I got a job as a radio disc jockey. That's how I met some of the big timers. Like I interviewed Ruth Brown, I interviewed Billie Holiday. When Duke Ellington came into town and needed a singer, there I was. Because I was the female disc jockey. The radio station was WRMA, and I was the only woman. Well, I had made a name for myself because well, you see, I guess I've always done what I wanted to do, like now. You know, I go out there and I face the public. I'm not, I am nervous, but I'm not afraid, because once I get out there, I know that we get together. You know, it seems that there's a relationship going on there. That's how it has to be. But I can do that with one person or a room full. Prefer the room full, though, you know, but if it's just one person. I don't know if I answered your question. And I went to school. That's how I did that. And then traveling, I was going to be an opera singer. So I traveled with the college choral group. I met musicians there. And by working my way through school, every chance I got, I would go into a night, well, during those days, we called them honky-tonk places, or there was a juke joint or something like that. There was always a jukebox, and we had the, you could play those things that you put a quarter in. They do it in Las Vegas. And they can pull that, the slot machines, yeah. And I would always find a spot like that, and I'd go and put a few to see what the band was like. And I was very lucky. I guess because I'm forward, and that's the reflux. And I would go up and ask them to, hey, can I sit in with you on one? And I guess maybe it was see, the jazz group we had our own little lingo, you know. Like, can I sit in with you, man, or something like that? And they said, oh, she talks the language. Let's try it, see what it's like. What do you want to sing? And you gotta remember, I was a stand-up singer, right? So I knew my keys, and I would say the keys. Of course, during that time, a lot of the groups would not transpose for you. You had to sing in the key they had it in. And most of your old songs, which I do, songs from the 1900 to 1950s, most of them are written in the key of E flat, if you notice. And you had to be able to sing in E flat, unless that group that you were going to sit in with wanted to transpose for you. And that's how I got it, because they found that I could go into. And also I had people back in my corner that was saying, hey, she's in town. Come on up and sing a few. And that's how I got to sing with big bands. That's how I got to work with big bands, you know, things like that. Always kept my name on somebody's list. If you ever need a singer, I'm there.
That was great. So right now, I guess we're about at the 1950s in your story. So why don't you tell us about a few of the characters, you know, the gangsters and the musicians?
Oh, God, do I have to go there? Well.
At least the musicians. Count Basie and everything.
Oh, well, they weren't gangsters.
I know.
They weren't. I worked with Cap Calloway at the, in New York City at, oh God, I'm having a senior moment. No, it wasn't the Cotton Club. It was that club they had on 125th Street. I tell you about that. It was that hotel. Was it Hotel Teresa? Hotel Teresa? Was it Hotel Teresa? I think that was it.
Grand Concourse.
No, I'm up in Harlem. I'm up in Harlem. Hotel Teresa. Where did Castro pluck those chickens?
That's it.
Hotel Teresa.
Right.
That's the hotel.
So start again then.
Yeah. When I worked at Hotel Teresa, and I also worked there with Red Priceout. Forgot about that. The late Cab Calloway. I think that was my stint with the big timers there at Hotel Teresa. And then I had my own spot that I did, my own show at Hotel Teresa. I had a little trio that I went in with. One fellow was called Broadway Bill. He's still alive today. And the bass player was Fangs Rivera, Martin Rivera. He has since worked with Junior Mance. You know Junior Mance. You've heard of Junior Mance. Martin Rivera. Well, Martin Rivera is still alive too. We're in contact with one another. And Smith, what's his name? George Smith? Is it George Smith that, well, he has a brother here in Charleston, but George is in, see, I get those brothers' names mixed up, but he's in Atlanta, Georgia now, I believe George Smith is. But he was one of the guys that worked with me, you know. Then I had my own little trio. And Broadway Bill, Bill English is his name, was a great drummer. But he's always so busy doing things he shouldn't be doing, like run around. Hey, what's the latest number for the day, man? He's trying to kill me for saying this. But if we had to hit a spot at 8 o'clock, and I knew we had to be there at 7:30, and let's say it was a 30-minute drive, that means you gotta be on the road at 7. I would tell Broadway Bill, I have to pick you up at 6 o'clock, man, because that's what time we have to be there to hit at 7, you know. Because he was always so busy, and it took that time to try to find him first. And he's still out there doing the same thing, because I heard he was a little ill right now, you know, maybe going through what I'm going through, the senior moments.
That's great.
These were fun times, though.
Tell me about meeting and marrying Cy.
Well, I met Cy in the Catskills. There was a Bush section of upstate New York. And of course, I was the only little token black in that hotel. It was at Pine Hill, New York. And there I was. But I could go out during the day. I worked there just on weekends. I would go out there and I would sit at the pool during the day and things like that. Now up there, you know that's the, they call it the Catskills, and that was the Jewish section. So a lot of the acts they sang in Jewish. Well, see, I could sing in all those different languages and things like that. And I was sitting at the pool one day, and I had been married once. I had been married, that marriage lasted about, I'll say 18 months. Enough for 2 children, right? Then I had met a guy in Chicago, fell in love immediately, married him, that lasted 4 days. And then I had just come out of that, and I was in upstate New York in the Catskills. And here comes this angel swimming by me. I didn't, you know, I didn't go in the pool. but they would let me sit out there and read out by the pool. But I sat on the back end of the pool. And finally he swam to my end of the pool, and I said, "Hey fella, where do you want to spend the rest of your life?" I guess he says to this day, why did I ever even answer her? And that's how it all started. Then we got married, and we have, he adopted my first 2 children, and we have 2 of our own. You know, that we, biologically, he's the biological father. But he brought up the other 2 as his own too, because they were young too. And they only know him as the father. And we've been together ever since, happily ever after. But one of these days, I'm gonna let you go. We have a lot of fun. I don't know what to say about Cy, because Cy is so much a part of my life. You gotta remember that I have known Cy most all of my life. That's all I know, that's Cy. That's my Cy. He's an extension of my life. Well, God is first.
How old were you when you met him?
Oh, do I have to go way back then? I don't remember back those ages. I was young enough to know that's what I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. In fact, I told God, if you see, I was very young and foolish, and I told you, I got married to my first husband at, was that 19? I was either 19 or 20, and that lasted like 18 months, and then I was always, so I had to be around early 20s, right? Yeah. No, let me see. Count 45 years from 71. All right, let's don't go into that, but that's where you're coming from, because we have 45 years together. And I just don't know anything else besides. I don't want him to get a big head behind this, because, you know, he's, that's the way he is. He's very, he wants to be in control of things. But I'm in control, always.
All right, well, after you married Cy, this was, whatever the year was, it was right in the midst of the civil rights movement era.
Yeah.
So that must have given you a whole kind of different perspective.
Yeah, I went back home. I told Cy, I says, you know, I don't know. Well, I wanted to try teaching again. That's what it was, because we had, I told you I had gone through stressful jobs and things like that, and I really wanted to, I says, well, my parents and my mother was still after me to teach, and my father was saying, you don't use your education, because they figured, even though I'm in music, that wasn't, they wanted me to teach music. See, that's all they knew. You were either a preacher or a teacher or a preacher. And if I wasn't teaching it and performing it, or going to be that big opera star that I thought I was going to be, you know, it wasn't using my education. So I told her I'm going to try to teach again. So I went back home to teach in Alabama, because I was certified for Alabama, right? I didn't make it, but I did make a position. I don't think I want to go into that, because it's a sad time. That was at the beginning of that civil rights movement. What was her name that was on the bus? Miss Parks, Miss Parks, Miss Rosa Parks, yeah. They had an experimental group of black cops at that time, and I was one of them. And I was on the bus in uniform when that bus was locked, and the bus driver left and arrested that lady. They came back and they handcuffed that lady. She didn't deserve to be handcuffed. She did. Well, see, then on the buses, they had these signs. See, young kids don't believe they ever had this. They had signs, white, and the arrow would point, you know, like you see directions to go to somewhere, and black, the arrow would be pointing toward the back, you know, and you knew. And that sign went right where the white would, you know, where it was cut off from the blacks. But that particular day, the bus was very crowded. People were coming in from work, right? And there was one seat. It wasn't one seat, but behind that sign was where the blacks were to sit. That was all full up. And Rosa Parks was very tired that day. And she had to sit down. And she just sat. And finally, one white person got on that bus and wanted that seat. And there was Rosa Parks sitting there. And the bus driver asked her, told her she'd have to leave, go, stand up and go in the back. And she just held her head down like this. And she made a little comment, something to the effect of, I paid my dime like she did. And with that, he took it as an insult. And with me sitting there, and I felt that I was being disrespected, you know? He got off that bus and locked all of us up on the bus. You know, locked the door and got a white cop and brought in, and they just took her out in handcuffs as if she had slugged somebody or really hurt somebody, you know? And that took a lot of effect on me. That really, it was, because all my life, I grew up in Alabama. I worked in, as they say, the white folks' kitchens, you know? I did the washing and irons. I took care of their little babies and things like that. So you see, it was never a color thing with me. It was a thing where these children, I mean, I would wash dishes in their kitchen as if I was part of that family. There was no color thing that I'm doing for the white folk or I'm doing it for the, you know what I'm trying to say? I don't want to get on this subject. I don't like getting on the subject because that's, you know, but I don't know why I always come to this. And when this happened, it was very, see, as a young kid, I never saw color. I could never see color. In fact, my father never understood that. He never understood that. But I never saw color. I guess because that's why I am in music. Because you gotta admit, music has no color. Am I right? Those notes are either what? Black or white. You can play the black one as good as you can play the white ones, right? That's right. You can mix them all up and they make beautiful music. And that's the way people are. That's the way people are. And so it had a lot of effect. But when I knew Martin Luther King, I knew him personally. I knew Ralph Abernathy. Ralph Abernathy was I had a crush on him when I was in school. We went to the same school, Alabama State. And I always thought of him as being my little boyfriend, you know? So you can see where was that, you know? But I told, Martin Luther approached me too about being that, and it wasn't that out of fear or anything. It was because I knew I had this feeling, and I didn't quite understand what was going to happen, and I don't like violence. And I had pictured in my mind there was going to be violence, you know? Also about, see, I got fired because of that incident because I wanted to go into court and testify on Ms. Parks' behalf. And I was told, I know I shouldn't say this, but I was told that I probably wouldn't even get out on the top step alive if I did something like that. And it wasn't so much afraid. I was never afraid. It was just that I'm still to this day, I don't like anybody to threaten me. Don't threaten me. You know, it's not right. I don't like violence. So I decided, I says, I want to do my thing my way. And a lot of my concerts, when I travel, sometimes I start with the Martin Luther King song if I can help somebody with my words or with my song. So I went as an individual. And to this day, I still do that. I don't do that to be a big martyr or anything. It's just me. You understand what I'm saying? Am I answering?
That was, I have no idea. Can you tell us more about how you came to be on that bus with Rosa Parks? Because that is just...
Going home.
Can you just start with a, kind of introduce it and talk to Gilly?
Oh.
Because you
said you were...
A cop riding the bus in my uniform, because we could ride free too, you know. So I rode. Well, also I had a family, I had a sister, to this day she still does the same thing, that I never could use my car. She always had my car. And wherever it broke down, it could be 100 miles away, she left it. I used to have to buy cars all the time. Well, there you could buy a car for $100. I mean, a good running car. And so I did a lot of bus driving. I could take cabs, but you got free rides on the bus if you were in uniform. And that's how I rode the bus. So when I got fired from that, then I went back and, well, I wasn't there, what, about 3 months? It wasn't much, it wasn't long. It was just a trial thing, I told you, to see what would happen. And I think after I left, I think I heard that most of us, there were 6 of us, most of them were all, some way or another had been fired, you know, and they just kept the white, but now it's, they're all, it's, but, you know, they don't separate, they have black and white cops. In Montgomery, Alabama, I know, because I've been there.
Right, well,
I don't know another way to tell you how I got on that bus.
Well, just maybe something like, believe it or not, I was actually on the bus with Rosa Parks that day.
Believe it or not, I was.
Well, okay, so just, because for me to use that story,
yeah.
I have to have you introduce it. So if you just look at Gil and relax, take a breath,
Yeah.
start as if you were just telling a story to like maybe a group of kids.
And you want to know something else?
Yes.
I guess you've heard of, see, you're so young, I guess you've heard of this, see, I like to talk to the young kids about this. Because I try to tell the kids, you know, I'm going to do a hit song. My granddaughter wrote the song for me because I talked to her about it. I am woman, I am black, but I am not bitter. I came up through some times when young kids could never imagine what's going on. Like, let's take before, I was on that bus with Rosa Parks coming down Dexter Avenue that day. I'm the one that stood in, then we had it was a penny, what they call it, 5 and dime, the 5 and dime store with the 2 faucets. They had a white drinking fountain here and a black drinking fountain there. And I would stand and stretch as far as I could go with my 2 hands to let them know and run both waters at the same time and say, I can't believe this, both waters run clear. But see, I played a fool there too. That was a fool. But you know the difference in the waters, that one was cold and the other was like room temperature or whatever came out, you know? Those were the times, you know? But with all of that, I am not bitter because now I look back and those were the times. And I tell my kids, I don't ever want you to carry any bitterness, or I don't ever want you to use that you couldn't have made it because the white man didn't let you. The white man doesn't hold you back. You can go out there and run for president if you want to. You can. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. What,
You like
said
that?
you knew Dr. King.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about him, or maybe Ralph Abernathy, or maybe Malcolm X? Just anything you can kind of think of.
Yeah, well, you know, I've met all of them. I've met all of them. I'm around, I think Martin Luther might, what is he, about a year older than me? He would be about a year older than me now. I think, yeah. Well, they used to have a church on Dexter Avenue. I was in First Baptist Church, and I grew up in First Baptist Church, you know, but we always wanted to go to Dexter Avenue because, well, our church too, then these Baptist churches, you know, they went, who was the elite in that church and that church. That's the way religion, church religion was, you know. A lot of people wanted to go to, not because at that time Martin Luther wasn't the leader of like a freedom march or anything like that. He was just an ordinary person. You know, the reason I say ordinary person because I put Martin Luther King on a pedestal. Sometimes I hear people talk about, I know it sounds foolish. They talk about the second coming of Christ, you know. And at times I have made the statement, you might not realize it, but Christ has been here a second time. He came in the form of Martin Luther King. And I do believe it because, you know, I guess I'm dramatic enough to see him praying alone and remembering when Christ, was it Christ that went on the top of the mountain to pray? And I can see Martin Luther King praying. It's almost like it's continuing. It's just coming around, and still coming around. And I relate so closely to things like that. And I do have high respect for Dr. King. Malcolm X, I knew him too. In the beginning, I didn't favor him too much. I didn't favor him at all, really. Because I didn't like it that in the beginning he wanted separation of the races. And I told you, I've always loved people, regardless. I had a friend when I was about 7 years old. My father gave me a big whipping because he couldn't get me to stop playing with this little girl. It was a little white girl. But we never saw each other as white and black, white and black, white and black. She didn't live in my community, but when I went to school, I had to pass through her house, you know. And I have seen her mother also blast her for talking nice to me, and it had nothing to do with color. It was two innocent kids relating to one another. And I've always believed that, always. That's why I think I like that thing, we're gonna walk hand in hand. We are doing it now. We play together. Musicians, since way back then, regardless of your color, you could walk into a place, as long as you carried your axe on you. I don't mean a shopping axe. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, your musical instrument. You can sit in, man, and blow with us too. There was always that brotherhood, that comradeship with musicians, always. They always respected one another. Way back in the early 1900s, probably even before then. But it's always, and that's why. But at first I didn't favor Malcolm X too much because of that. But then as he grew too, he realized that maybe some of that, probably he had been taught to be bitter, was not to be bitter about, because there was that way of life then, you know? I had a great, see, I always try to remember, was that my great-grandfather, my grandfather? There was a slave, you know? And the stories, you know? If anybody should be bitter, but it was a way of life. It was accepted at the time. But look how progress has been made, right? Look where we've come today. So you don't have to be bitter. I had a friend in the Berkshires I shouldn't call her name either, because, well, I won't call her name. But her parents were Germans. And because of that, she accepted a lot of, I said she put herself out there and carried a guilt for being born. You can't help that. I was born black. I am black. I am proud. I am born. See, that's what the whole thing is all about. I didn't choose my parents. They chose to have me. And I am blessed to have been born. Am I right or wrong? And she used to stand out there and she would just take all kind of abuse. If somebody found out, they used to tease her sometimes about, well, during the, I'm not going to get into that, but they would tease her about being German, but it was always a negative thing on her. And if she was around a lot of, like sometimes they would pick on her because she was white. And she was a dear friend too. See, I had all friends. I'm not a martyr, but I have friends and they don't come in color. But when they start that kind of stuff, I do tell them what I feel and get off of her, because you got to come through me. That's my friend. And I'm not a violent person, but I guess I showed them my eyes. I used to tell my father, Daddy, did you hear the way that man blew his horn at you? Drive by him so I can give him the look. I used to give him a death look. And that's what I would do to people, so they would leave her alone. They wouldn't bother her. The rest is, I'd give them my eyes. You gotta come through me. I guess people thought I was crazy.
Great. All right, well, good. Moving up through the decades, the 1970s were a big decade for you. You were nominated for a Grammy. Yeah. You did a lot of recording in New York.
Oh, yeah.
Tell Gil about all that.
Let me tell you about that, Gil. That's when we really see. Remember I told you I had been very ill? I came down with a critical illness, and the doctors had said I was going to, that I wouldn't last 3. Oh, I got very sick. I was so weak. My husband had to feed me. I couldn't hold a spoon in my hand. But we got through that, you know, we went through that. I believe in prayer, too. I believe in a lot of prayer. And I prayed for strength. And to this day, I still believe in prayer. And whether you know it or not, prayer can work miracles, because I have seen miracles. And I'm going to tell you about a song I wrote later. But it took me years, because I was working on a job and my husband was in a fixed income. No, I mean he was in a high bracket income. And they call it they call it, he's in an income security bag. That's what it was. And I was always out there able to make good money, right? So I had said I was going to leave this critical job, which would, you know, cause him, because the doctor even said that since you're not going to go through this treatment that we want to give you, you better leave this job, because it's eating you up alive. And every time I discuss it with my husband, I'm putting in my resignation, there would be this big fight. He was in this security bag regardless, and we were like middle income. And back then, middle income was a lot of money, you know? We could go out and buy a new car, we could go out and buy our home, you know, whatever you want. And it wouldn't be a burden for mortgages and to pay on a car, the car you want, and you ate whatever you wanted. We went out and ate in fancy restaurants at least 3 times a week, you know, fancy. I mean money restaurant where you pay. And
Your middle.
Yeah, that incorrect. So finally, what I had to do, it took me a few years to finally decide, this is your life, stupid. He's in his security bag, then let him do it by himself, because you'll be dead. Then act like already. Do it. So I decided I'm leaving that job. And I did. We had to go on vacation. So I put my resignation in, effective the last day of my vacation. That was it. Let's say it was January 1st, I put in my resignation, and we had I think it was a 14-day vacation. Last day effective was 14th of January. So I never had to go back again. And we had a place up in the mountains that we had bought us a little hideaway place. That's where we used to go when we wanted to get away from the hustle and bustle of New York City, right? And he says, oh, I hate to go back to New York. I hate to go back to the job. Now, he was born and bred in New York, all the way. I says, well, I don't have to go back. Why don't you take off? You don't have to go. And he said, what do you mean? You have to go to, well, no, I got to tell you what brought this on. Because he didn't like his job. He was one of the highest paid in management. But he didn't like the job. He was good on that job. Everybody depended on him. And he made the money. But he hated the job. And there were times that he had burnout so often. He would, before we were married, he would go away, just go away, wouldn't tell anybody. He would leave that job. But he was so good, they kept him. He wouldn't say, I'll be gone for a few days. He just wouldn't come in, wouldn't call, and they might not see him maybe 3 weeks later. And then when we got married, he had this thing every morning, work days, regurgitate. Every morning, 5 days a week. The moment he came home from work, everything was fine. So he didn't realize he was on a stressful job too. So it got so he wouldn't take off from the job because now you got to remember, we're married. You can't take off from me. He just wouldn't go in. He wouldn't call. I used to call. And I decided, no more of this. So I says, why do you want, just take off. Don't go back. I don't have to go back. He said, what do you mean you don't have to go back? Yes, you do. Because you're the one that, he took off so much, he owed the city. The city didn't have to pay him. He had to pay them now for keeping him on the roads, So I says, I resigned. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. Of course, there was a big fight. Sure enough, found out I no longer worked for that department. And that's when I say, I'm going into music now. Full time. Full time, and you are going to come out with me because you're not working. Even though you got this job, you are not being there. And I don't like this. Because that was irresponsible what he was doing, right? So he became my manager. And we produced our first recording at NOLA Studio in New York City on 57th Street. It was a famous studio. And the engineer was Les Paul Jr., a great engineer he was. You've heard of Les Paul and Mary Ford Drill. Well, their son engineered me. And my musical director was Luther Henderson. Luther Henderson, you've heard of Oz? I mean, the Wiz. That was the name of the year. He was a musical director for that. He was a musical director for, right now I can't come up with the names, but everything Luther Henderson touched was a hit. So I said, he's got to help me. And I had him as my musical director. So our song, it was a song that Cy wrote when he was in school, and it was published in, as a poem, and I took it and set it to music. And I did that, and then we did a flip side that we wrote out of that fight, I tell you, when I decided that I was going to resign. And in that song, I was talking about packing my bags. I got the, time and I'm gone, if I wasn't going to accept it. That was on the flip side of that. We pulled that single, and that single went up for Grammy in 5 categories in '74. But that single didn't get an award, but it was up for Grammy. Stevie Wonder took all the awards. You know Stevie Wonder? With "You Are the Sunshine of My Life." But he did some good music too. You gotta give it to the kid. He did. I still call him a kid, because then he was a kid. I think that's pretty much what it was with our first recording. Then the other recordings, we did an album for that. Then they did the big tape. It was a big tape. We did, I can't remember, something like 7 or 8 songs on that album. But that, we pulled it as a single, and we produced it ourselves. What we did was we took all of our monies, went for broke. Seems every time I record, I do that. We went for broke, and we produced that with our monies. I had studio musicians, but they come expensive too.
Oh, that's great. So you mentioned about this music changing. It changed more in the '60s with the Beatles, and then again in the '80s.
Yeah.
Really, what happened in the '80s with you? I mean, this is kind of a blank area in my knowledge of your life. So,
well, the '80s, was it the late '70s that I recorded again? I recorded 3 albums. Was it the late '70s? And I believe that's when, around '83, another recording came out. The Souls and, was that the Souls and Sounds of Del Rae? The Sound and Soul of Del Rae. And do you want to know something? I don't even remember the numbers that were done on that. But there, I didn't have a musical director on that one. I just had I had a guy called John Harris on guitar. It's just like a trio, we did that. I had, I had John Dooley on, John Dooley was on bass.
sorry, I just had to interrupt you, but 1 second. The microphone is kind of rubbing against your sweater there. Let me see.
Do we need to overhead to move to? It's kind of on our head.
Let's talk about the studio musicians.
Studio.
Yeah, and what was his name? Perkins, Walter Perkins. You ever heard of Walter Perkins?
Baby Sweets.
Baby Sweets, Walter Perkins. And on that recording, it was so funny. We had gotten up. We were jamming at our house that night because we were gigging together then, doing trio things, and they had come to my house, and I had made a little supper, one of those chili suppers and stuff like that. And we were sitting there, and it was such a nice rehearsal that night. It must have been about 4 o'clock in the morning. We decided to call. We had spoken with an engineer and become sort of good talking terms. I wouldn't say we were that close because we didn't think he was going to do this. And he was just starting out with his own recording studio. And we called him up like 4 o'clock in the morning and say, "You wouldn't like to record this crazy group now, would you?" And he says, "I don't know what he's talking about." And then we decided we would go over there as a reflux. He decided we would go over there. He and his wife met us at the studio in their pajamas and robes, and we recorded it. Now you got to remember that at that time of morning, we'd been playing all night because we just like to play. When we weren't gigging, we would just play. And I remember, I think on one of those tunes you might hear, I'm going to go back and get my masters and see about if it's not on there. He's saying, "Shut up," because I had a tendency to, you know, I talk. You've seen me perform. And I do talk during the performance. "Shut up," and see, I'm not a violent person, right? So I looked at him and I told him, "Don't be telling me what to do, and all of this is on that recording. I'll come over there and take your arm off and beat you to death with a stump of it." It's what they record. But that was Baby Perkins, Baby Sweet Perkins. And a lot of people know Walter Perkins for that because he was crazy. He taught in one of the high schools in New York City. Yeah, but he was crazy. And I wonder if he ever did that to his students because he was crazy. We used to have a lot of fun. And then I did another recording later on where I was going to record a religious album for my mother. And I have this man that's very dear to me. His name was Jerry LaManna. I always called him my godfather. And Jerry LaManna had a club, and I worked for him. Because I had worked for one club for 14 years, and I got burned out at that club. And, well, the man that owned, the father died, and the son, I loved the son as if he were my own kid, but we just couldn't work together, you know, because the son didn't know how to run the business like the father. And you got to remember that I was older, you know. This is all in the 80s I'm talking. So the last song, and the songs I recorded for my godfather was Four Kisses and One for You. Because, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then One for You. 4 Kisses and One for You. That's a good song, too. In fact, I should put that back in my repertoire. Jerry, I worked at his place in I should know because we're still in contact with each other. I just sent him, you know, a clipping that the press release that you had written for me because I wanted him to see it.
Good, let's take a little break here.
Yes, sir.